Here are three early bets for week one of college football. First up, North Carolina should not be an underdog against Minnesota, and here's why. North Carolina has moved on from Drake May. Max Johnson comes in transferring in from Texas A&M. In the few starts that he had for the Aggies last season, he was a decent passer, had an 80.6 PFF passing grade, but the real focus of the North Carolina offense is going to be on running the football. Last season, they were 13th in EPA per rush because they have a great running back in Omarion Hampton, who comes back after averaging 5.9 yards per carry. They're going to have a great matchup against Minnesota's front seven that does return about everybody, but they struggled to defend the run last season. We're 99th in EPA per rush allowed. Minnesota brings in a new quarterback in Max Brosmer from New Hampshire, but even at the FCS level, he kind of struggled. He only had a PFF passing grade of 79.3, and the focus on the Minnesota offense, quite frankly, is running the football. They ran the ball on over 60% of their offensive plays because they have a great running back in Darius Taylor, but Darius Taylor was hampered in practice with a leg injury, so either he's not going to play in this game because he's listed as questionable, or he's not going to be 100%. And the drop-off between him and the backup running backs is very, very significant. So I think North Carolina is really well positioned here in this first game. They'll have a great advantage with their run game, so I like the value on them at +3. Next up, Boise State should hammer Georgia Southern, and here's why. Spencer Danielson made a pretty bold decision in opting to start redshirt sophomore Madison at quarterback over their highly touted transfer Malachi Nelson from USC. But the reality is that the Boise State offense is going to be centered around their run game. They ran the ball on close to 60% of their offensive plays because they have an amazing running back in Ashton Jeanty. Last season, he was a fourth-team All-American, averaged 6.1 yards per carry, and had a 93.5 PFF rushing grade, which was the fifth best mark in college football. Boise State returns a lot of experience across their offensive line after ranking 14th in offensive line yards, so they should have a really good matchup here against Georgia Southern that does return everybody in their front seven, but was 118th in EPA per rush allowed last season. The Georgia Southern offense is likely going to struggle early on here. Davis Brin has moved on, which means the backup quarterback last year, J.C. French, takes over. He only attempted 16 passes, and if you know anything about Clay Helton, his offenses are incredibly pass-heavy. So a new quarterback going up against a Boise State defense that's returning all 11 starters is really not that good of a matchup. So I really like the value here on Boise State at -12.5 on the road. Next up, James Madison is undervalued against Charlotte in their opening game, and here's why. It's a new era for James Madison as Bob Chesney comes over from Holy Cross. He brought over his offensive coordinator, Dean Kennedy, as well, which means that James Madison is transitioning from a pass-heavy attack to a run-heavy team. To be a good run-heavy team, you got to go out and you got to get a good running back, and James Madison did that, bringing in A.O. Adai from North Texas. Last season, he became the starter for the Mean Green in Week 6, and he never looked back. He averaged 7.1 yards per carry and had a PFF rushing grade of 88.8. James Madison has a lot of experience across their offensive line through guys coming back and guys coming through the transfer portal, and they'll have a really good matchup against Charlotte here in this first game, who was a very average rush defense last season, but got completely gutted in their front seven. They lost their top 2 linebackers and 6 of their top 8 tacklers, so James Madison should be able to run the ball with a lot of success. Charlotte's offense was terrible last season. They were 130th in offensive success rate and 128th in finishing drives. They brought in a lot of transfers on the offensive side of the ball, including Max Brown at quarterback. The one start that he's had in college football at Florida, he was awful. He went 9 of 17 for 86 yards and had 5 turnover-worthy plays against Florida State last season. So with a lot of new faces on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball, I think Charlotte's really going to struggle early on here. They may get better towards the end of the season, but definitely going up in this first game against a really good rush offense like James Madison, I think they're going to struggle. So I like the value on James Madison at -6.5.